Guys back out there after being shorthanded.
Yeah, it's good. Obviously, we got to see how they come through the week, but it's good to see Ozzy out there and Chad and Clinton Oba. So hopefully they'll all be able to play this weekend.
What are your expectations on Papa?
He's got the game today, and then we'll see when he comes back. Yeah.
There's some value in all those young guys getting the experience they have so far, just to kind of carry that going forward.
Yeah, there's always value in that. It gives them confidence, allows them to know that they can play at that level. You make some mistakes, you learn from those mistakes as well. But the confidence and the experience is really important. You can't replicate that.
You've talked in the past about not wanting to rush Cristian into things. Sort of got forced into the lineup a little bit, but how has he kind of dealt with that and the transition that comes from being a starter?
He's done all right. From a standpoint of mentality, I really don't worry much about him. He's pretty grounded. He's got his feet, exactly where they need to be. I think he's pretty realistic when he analyzes his game as well. So I'm not worried about him that way.
Sure. A bit of a different formation for you guys. Was that more because of the team that you're playing against in matchups, or was it more just kind of putting your lineup in the best place to succeed?
A little bit of both, a little bit of personnel, and also a little bit of what they would, what we thought they would come with and what they would bring, and so it was a little bit of both. Yeah.
Sure. Going in there with short-handed a little bit, I mean, were you guys maybe being a little bit more reactive and trying to sit back and absorb some pressure early on, and did that change at all with the red card?
No. I just think, we were a little bit cautious at the beginning of the game, which I didn't think we should have been. That was something we talked about today in the film session. And as I said, and when they got the red card, it really doesn't change how they play. We needed to do a better job of spreading the field at that point, which we did in the second half, and that's why we created, when you look at it at the end of the day, and looking at it again last night and breaking it down, I mean, we had 4 really quality chances. You got to bury one of those 4.
You mentioned Clinton Oba and the guys getting back out there. How did you think their training session went?
It went all right. I thought they were okay. And again, it's always, better than the next day, how they feel the next day and where they're at. But I thought it went okay.
What are the chances of them getting into the match against Houston?
We'll see. We'll know more, come Thursday.
Obviously, I'll try to win everything, especially at home. But does it matter at all that Houston is a conference opponent this season?
Well, I don't know if it's better. I think, Houston and Kansas City coming into our side of things makes the West even tougher at the end of the day. But, what's important for us is we're going into a home game. We want to come out in the home game. We want to be aggressive, and we want to make sure that, that we win our games at home. We weren't happy with the last performance at home.
You mentioned Cristian being grounded and all that. It's maybe not a trait every 19-year-old has out here. Was that something you kind of knew about him coming in, or has he surprised you with that a little bit?
No, sort of knew that about him coming in, obviously got to know him a little bit in his time at Washington, and just his ability there to step into the competition, because he wasn't the most heralded recruit or anything like that. And, meeting his parents, his parents have done a good job.
You mentioned Houston and KC coming into the West. I mean, the West has always been so difficult, but now with those two teams, I mean, Houston's regularly in the finals, and Sporting obviously winning just a couple years ago. How does that change the dynamic of the West?
I don't know. You'll know more at the end of the season, but it certainly, like I said, it certainly makes the West a little bit tougher. But then, when you look at the point totals, there's, I guess, lower point totals in the East. But then, there's been some East teams that have, beaten some West teams as well. So, it'll all sort itself out by the end of the year. But certainly, when you look at it on paper, it means that, there's going to be more difficult games. There's going to be a tighter competition for those top 6 spots.
Do you think it's a little bit unfortunate that they didn't bring a team like Columbus in, or just, make it a little bit easier, balanced out, I guess?
I know Columbus is a tough place because we can't get there direct, so we'd rather have a place that we can get there direct. So.
With Darwin Jones, he didn't even make the starting lineup for S2's first game. Were you guys trying to send any kind of message to him maybe, and given that he scored a hat trick in game 2, was the message maybe received a little bit?
Well, it's obviously take advantage of your opportunities, which he did. He took advantage of his opportunities, and it's the transition to the pros is you got to come out every day and you got to play. You can't not do it every day. And he's still a young pro, so he's still he's still looking at that and growing from that. Some guys start well and then fade, and some guys don't start as well and then come on. Everybody has a little bit of a different path.
Can you touch on Roldan a little bit more? Obviously, appearing in every game and getting his first start this last match.
He's doing well. We don't want to make too big a thing of it, but he's, like I said, he's learning, he's improving. We've asked him to play different places. We've asked him to play wide in midfield. He also plays inside in midfield a lot for us. Still adjusting to the speed of play a little bit, but. It was a tough week for him, tough week a little bit for Kovar too, playing 90 minutes against Tijuana. And Kovar on top of that had played, and Roldan had played some minutes, in the S2 game. And so it was really their third game in a week, when we came into Dallas. So from that standpoint, we were asking a lot of the young guys, and maybe mentally, it was a tough one, but they're both pretty good mentally, and they pushed themselves. So. Where
eventually do you see his spot being on the field, just because you have moved him around to different positions?
Eventually I think he's probably an inside midfielder, but, it all depends. Like I say, you play different ways, and it depends on your personnel. So you play a 4-4-2, can he play an outside midfielder in a 4-4-2 that's more like a midfielder and less like a winger? Yeah, he could play there too.
With Cristian, what was the draw? What was it that you guys saw in him that you thought he'd be a good fit here in Seattle?
He's a kid. I just like the way he competed. He was a kid that always competed, and in the big games that UW played, when guys had to come to the forefront, he was a guy that usually did. He scored goals in big games, got assists in big games. He's not a guy who banged away goals when they won 4-0 or something like that. He did it in tougher competition, and whenever there was an opportunity to train with us, he was here. And he was just really, really reliable. And I like his story. When I was coaching at UCLA, one of the things for me was always, can you find players, not recruit guys off the under-20 national team and the under-17s, because everybody knows who they are, but can you find other guys? And I think, we were able to make a lot of our history at UCLA when I was there with guys like Joe Max Moore and Mike Lapper and Kobe Jones and Carlos Bocanegra and guys like that who never really played for any national teams till after they got to UCLA, because they were hungry. And I think Cristian, when he came to UW, was hungry. He was not on UCLA's top recruit list because he wasn't on the under-17 national team. And when he came here, he was hungry, and he was trying to prove it. And I like players who are hungry.
As you've mentioned already, still very, very early. But if the season ended right now, y'all are seventh out of a league where only 6 get in.
Game, so hopefully they don't end the season and let us play one less game than everybody else. So we'll take the game in hand right now. We just got to turn the game in hand into 3 points, and then our position in the table changes dramatically.
Well, what do you make of generally the 1-1-1, and when do you start looking at the standings with any sort of seriousness?
It's way too early to look at that. At the end of the day, like I've always said, you got to average a 1.5 a game. Usually is what gets you to the playoffs. Are very close. Right now, I think we're at 1.3 or 1.33. We win on Saturday, and then we're like at 1.75. So when it's early in the season like that, it changes dramatically. I think when you're about 10 games in, that's when you can start thinking about it.
And on the same sort of too damn early topic, but if
you're liking that,
I am kind of. But while I assume it is true that Kansas City and Houston toughen the West, these expansion teams look like they came in pretty serious. What are you making of those two so far?
Yeah, obviously the expansion teams I think have done a good job. You got an experienced coach in Jason Kreis at New York, and you've got a lot of clout there with Man City, behind the organization. So I think that helped them, and obviously they went out and signed, some prominent DPs and went after it that way. Adrian Heath at Orlando City, they've been in the league for a while, and in terms of he's been in America for a while, and they were in the USL for a while, and they had a good idea of what they were trying to do. Then obviously again signing a very prominent player like Kaká and having the connections that they have in Brazil and some of the other jobs they've done and their whole scouting networks. Obviously their GM, the guy who took over as GM, Paul McDonough, was an agent, so he had a lot of, prior to becoming a GM, so he had a lot of connections, a lot of players that he was aware of, that he was trying to push to other clubs. Now he pushes them to his own club. So I think both of them, like I've always said, an expansion club's got to hit it right with DPs, you got to hit it right in the draft, and you got to hit it right with your discovery players, and you got to do all right in the expansion draft. And I think they've done that. Jason picked some guys who he was very familiar with, like Ned Grabavoy and Chris Wingert, etc. And obviously Orlando got some players with experience like Ricketts and so forth. So I think they've both done a really good job.
Dallas was also a little bit shorthanded over the weekend, at least in part due to international duty. As a coach, would you like to see the league do at least a little bit better job of working in the bye week so you don't have to have that type of situation so often?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is what it is, and I think it really comes down to our fans at the end of the day. I think in Seattle, our fans are fantastic, and so whether we would play a game on a Saturday night or a Wednesday night, generally it's not going to affect our attendance. So from that standpoint, that's where the other clubs need to get to. And I think, financially, there's still a difference for a lot of teams in our league, whether they play on the weekend or they play midweek. And once we get to the point that difference becomes less significant for more clubs, I think there's our team and Salt Lake and Kansas City and a few others that there's probably it really doesn't affect. Once we get to that point, then we can start taking international weekends off probably and make a little more sense out of it.
Back to what you said about when you were at UCLA and you went after guys that you said were hungry for things, and that's what you did with Roldan. Are there any other players that stick out on your squad right now that was why you went after them as well?
Well, hungry players like Andy Rose, I think, was a hungry player when he came to us. He was a guy that sort of got passed over in the draft, went a little bit later, so he's a good example of that. Evans was a guy who was sort of a late bloomer. So when he came into the league, he was a hungry player as well, even though he was a late, I think I drafted him late first round or early second round, I can't remember which, but still he was a hungry player, who brought that into the league. Alonzo is another guy who was a hungry player, because he had tried to, gone through a couple of trials, hadn't gotten picked up, went into the USL, and, now here was his opportunity. He was going to show people that you made a mistake by not taking me. And I think guys that, you have a little bit of a chip in your shoulder, it works out. I think Clint Dempsey was a very hungry player. When he came in, he was at Furman and, really wasn't in the under-20 pool or anything until really late into the game. And then all of a sudden people saw him play and say, wait a second, this is a guy not so bad. And he went out there and was like, hey, I want to prove to people that, I'm better than other guys that are there. So when you have that, it's... I think the guys who become really great players at some point went through some adversity, either somebody not thinking they were good enough or maybe just, struggles at home that they were trying to overcome, whatever. There's usually something there that they've shown that they can overcome. Maybe it's just having a lot of siblings. One of the hungriest players I ever coached, he had like 9. It was a family of 9, so just getting your meal in was a fight. So, so you want guys like that.